Well, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, USA. I was born deaf, and I went to an oral school in New York City, PS 47. It was a very well-known school. When I graduated, I went to the City College of New York. It was very challenging because that was immediately after World War II, and each of my classes had about 100 GIs who were attending school on the GI Bill, which allowed them to go to school for free. I was studying until 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes. My father saw how hard it was for me and told me that it just wasn't worth it. I agreed, and he convinced me to transfer to Gallaudet. And I came into Gallaudet as a sophomore and graduated in 1950.
So you graduated from Gallaudet and then came to Minnesota. What brought you here?
Well, during my senior year, uh, all of the students who were majoring in education were sending out their letters of interest to various schools and searching for teaching positions. In February, I got a letter from Minnesota, which was unusual because most people were notified during the spring. And so for me to get this letter in February was quite early, and I don't know why I happened to get this. They needed a teacher, so I went to see the principal of the Kendall School, where I had done my student teaching. I went there to ask her, and her name was Mrs. Wilder. I don't know why that name popped back into my mind suddenly. But I asked her about the Minnesota School for the Deaf. And right away, she told me the school was wonderful, that the students all learned straight English, and that they were using the Wings syllables. Now, I had no idea what that was. I'd never heard of it. I felt I needed another opinion, and so I went to see the president of Gallaudet, Dr. Elstad. He had actually been the superintendent of the Minnesota school just prior to coming to Gallaudet. He also told me that the Minnesota school was a very good school and that I should take the position. And so I thought, well, I got 2 positive responses, but I needed to get one more. So I went to the printing instructor at Gallaudet, the man who was teaching in the printing area. And he had been teaching at the Minnesota school, but when Dr. Elstad had come to Gallaudet, Dr. Elstad brought him with him. I asked him about going to Minnesota, and he told me the school was very good and that I should probably take the position. He said that the people in Minnesota tended to be tight, usually staying within their group. I wouldn't want to use the word clannish, but certainly insular. They were not particularly open to outsiders coming into their services or what have you. He said they were just cold, not particularly friendly. And I thought, well, Minnesota is a cold state. Maybe that's what makes the people cold. That shows you what kind of reasoning skills I had at those days. But I decided to go to Minnesota, and I think it was in the fall of 1950, I taught my first classes. I had several different students in several different subjects that first year. The second year, there was a math teacher in the high school who had left, and the principal asked me if I was interested in the position. And I was interested in teaching math, and so I thought, sure, I'd like to move up to the upper level grade. And I stayed there for 14 years. So counting my first year at Faribault, that made it 15 years at the school, and I really enjoyed my time at MSAD. I always enjoyed teaching, and it wasn't just the teaching itself, but also working with the students. They were all so bright, such a good group of students. I only had to teach a concept once, and they had it. It sure made my life easy. What else? Well, unlike what the printing teacher had said about Minnesotans, I found the people to be very nice and warm and welcoming. It was a very different experience. The town was very friendly, and the townspeople were very friendly. I got to know many people living there, and some became very good friends. I tended to go to one particular restaurant called the Olympia. There were three brothers who owned the restaurant, and I considered them friends. And I learned about the stock market by going to that restaurant. They happened to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. And when I would go there, they would always give me the day old Wall Street Journal, and I would look through the paper and learn about stocks and trades. And that all started from my experience in Faribault. While I was at Faribault, I also learned how to fly. The town of Faribault has a small airport, and I would go to the airport and had an instructor who would give me lessons. The two of us would sit side by side in a small airplane. Then I started to fly solo. I was really nervous the first time I did it, but I finally took that solo flight. I flew around for several hours, not all at once, but I did this from time to time. It was in Faribault that I also learned how to play squash. I'd play with the superintendent every Saturday in the school gymnasium. And, excuse me, I have to look at my notes. Oh yes, I became an official basketball referee. I did that for 11 years. I worked as a ref in the City League. That was a league that included both boys and men playing basketball. And then I also refereed for a small high school and Bible college. And let's see, what else did Faribault teach me? Excuse me while I look at my notes again. Oh, yes. Something very important. Faribault's where I learned to play golf. That's one of the other things I learned there. That was because there was a 9-hole golf course just across the street from the school. I could easily walk, or most of the time drive over to the course and play around after school. I learned by other people telling me what to do, but my advice to anyone else would be to make sure to take a golf lesson. Don't follow my path. Anyway, let's see. Well, that's about all of that. after 15 years, I wanted to advance professionally, so I decided to go to the California State University at Northridge. And there I studied what was then part of the National Leadership Academy. It was an 8-month master's program. A wonderful place. It's the only place in the world where you could get a master's degree in 8 months. Well, let's see. I have to remember this. I went in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. Yes, August, right. So my math is still good. I couldn't remember, but my math is still good. I got an 8-month degree, and I sent a letter back to Minnesota because I had always wanted to go back to Minnesota. And at that time, as I understood it, the academy, the state school, was changing positions, and they were creating a position for a dean of students. Prior to that time, they never had the dean's position. They had what were called headmasters. They had one for the boys' dorm, one for the girls' dorm, and then one for the young children, that dorm. And each of those individuals then reported on to the superintendent. But they wanted to create this new position, a dean of students, and have the 3 head of house report to the dean of students to lessen the responsibility or the obligations that the superintendent had. And now this was spring of '65 that I sent the letter, and I got a reply that said, "We are sorry, but we cannot hire you because the position requires that the individual must be able to use a telephone and must be able to speak to parents who do not know sign language. So we are sorry." And, there's nothing I could do about that. So I got a job teaching at the California School for the Deaf in Riverside. That's the Southern California School. It's a city just between LA and Palm Springs. Very nice town. I taught there in the fall of '65, but during that year I still wanted to get back to Faribault. And this is a sign for Faribault that I use. But I wanted to go back to Faribault where I did my primary teaching. There was nothing against the California School for the Deaf. It was just... But because I had heard that they were going to start a vocational technical school at the Faribault School for the Deaf, I knew the person in charge because his wife had taught me at the school. She was very nice. And I sent them a letter, and I got a very nice letter in reply. I actually have it with me. And that letter confirmed that they knew who I was, and the project was still in planning, but had not been completed yet. And as soon as the new school was ready to go, they would let me know. That was in 1965, and it's been since then until today that I still haven't heard from him.
Wow. Minnesota lost a wonderful leader and asset to California. Tell me more about when you first came to Minnesota. What was your salary and where did you live?
Thank you. Yes. I got a telegram from the superintendent offering me the job and paying me the salary of $295 a month. And that would then, I'd have to pay the $30 for my room and board from that $295. So that was a nice offer, $295 a month. I thought it was wonderful at that time. Of course, today.
Did you have or buy a car?
Yes, I bought a car. Before that, I lived on campus. And there were 2 rooms just above the powerhouse. They signed it this way, powerhouse. And I stayed there for a few years, but then the powerhouse was raised, and I moved over to an apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment on campus under the dining hall. And I stayed there until I left. It was very nice. Now about my car, yes, I did buy a car. I bought my first car. It was a Studebaker, a 1950, and I think the model was a Champion 2-door. It was a green 2-door. And I used that car to bring students to basketball games and football games. In fact, one time I took the boys down to a track meet that was happening at the Kansas school. And I brought the boys from Minnesota down to Olathe for the track meet there. And I used my car to do that. I enjoyed driving from Minnesota back to New York to visit my parents, and then driving across the United States to California. I put a lot of miles on that car.
When you first came to Faribault, were the boys still doing military drills?
Yes, you have reminded me that when I got to Faribault, there were boys wearing military uniform. And they had military practice. Faribault was one of the few schools at the time that still practiced military drills. The year after I arrived was the last year they had done that. But they practiced military drills around the grounds. Also, Faribault had a girls' drum corps. And many of the girls were in that corps, and they would perform during halftime of football games. And I understood that they were so good that they were even asked to go to the state of Minnesota basketball tournament in Minneapolis. And they performed twice during 2 different games. They did the first game and they had to wait then for the second game. And our girls went out during the half of the basketball game, and this was not during my time, it was prior to that. People in the audience even started to cry. I'm not sure why. I suppose it was an emotional experience seeing these girls drum. But they had a majorette, or a drum leader, who had a long baton and would help the students keep in time. They did a beautiful job. They stopped a few years later, which was too bad, because it was nice PR for the school.
Wow, you've seen a lot happen at the school. Can you talk to us a bit about your work with the deaf community? With what was then the Minnesota Association of the Deaf, or MAD, and is now the Minnesota Association of Deaf Citizens, or MADC. Tell us about that and your work with other organizations.
Oh yes, I was very involved at the time. For several terms I was the president of the Gallaudet Alumni Association. And I was very involved there. I was also involved with MADC. An example relations to the National Association of the Deaf. At that time, the 48 states were considering joining NAD, and there were 48 states at that time. And they had to get approval from each state organization to become an affiliate of NAD. And Minnesotans, the Minnesota members, you remember, were kind of insular and didn't want to necessarily do things with groups outside of Minnesota. And so they asked me to serve on the committee of 3. There was an individual who was a teacher at the deaf school, and he supported NAD. His name was Herbert Sellner. The other person, who's also a well-known leader from Minnesota, his name was Gordon Allen, and his name sign was a G on the forehead. He's a brilliant man, really. I was very impressed with him. And he was against the affiliation with NAD for many of the reasons that I described before. And then I was involved, and I was a teacher at the school, but I was seen as neutral. I didn't really have enough information about NAD. I didn't know it well at the time, so I was kind of on the fence. The 3 of us met, and we were to make a recommendation whether we join NAD or not. And we deliberated and discussed, and I remember during our discussions, it took a lot of time to come to consensus. But we finally agreed that we should join NAD. And we sent a telegram off to NAD, and we found that we had been the first state to affiliate with NAD. Several hours later, Oklahoma's chapter had decided to join NAD, and they thought they were first, but they were in fact second. And there was a man, his name was Ted Griffith. He was very good friends with Gordon Allen. They had always been slightly competitive. And so Gordon sent him a telegram and said, "No, you were not the first. We were the first." And it's been written in the history books that MADC, or Minnesota, was the first to align with NAD. Now, in reference to the Gallaudet Alumni Association, Minnesota's chapter was also the first chapter of the Alumni Association, state chapter. So Minnesota has a record of being first in many ways. And I'm happy that I was involved. I also think that I was involved and asked to speak to a variety of community groups in Minneapolis and St. Paul on a variety of different topics.
While you were teaching, did you attend the MAD conferences?
Yes, I did. I've gone to a few. But as I mentioned before, Minnesota as a group has its own way of doing things. And for example, I have gone to one MSAD meeting. I can't remember which meeting or which town that was in, but they were seeking new officers, president, vice president, so on. And someone nominated me as president. And another person got up and said, no, he cannot be president or even run for the office because he's not from Minnesota. He's not native. Therefore, he can't be a candidate for the position of president. So that's a clear example of how tight the group was at the time. My understanding is that the tradition was broken a few years ago, and a non-native Minnesotan was elected to the office, and that individual became president and has served 2 or 3 terms.
I remember when I was a young boy in Faribault looking up to you. You were a scoutmaster. Do you have any special memories of working with the scouts?
Oh, yes. I was a scoutmaster for a good number of years. And one memory I have of that time was that it was the practice for Faribault to pick a mayor for the day. So they would search among the students and choose one to run the city. And we sent in a student's name, Ron Nomland, and he was chosen for the mayor of the day. And he worked as mayor of the day in the office, made some decisions and did some writing. And his picture was on the front page of the Faribault newspaper. And I thought that was interesting.
So while you were in Faribault, were you involved in sports as a coach or anything else?
Yes, yes. I was a basketball coach for the 3rd team. Those were the small kids. And we played in a league against other well, it's a basketball group. You have varsity and junior varsity. And then this was a tier below that, and we called it 3rd team. And I was their coach. And we played against a variety of teams, and we became champ of the league. It was 1 year or 2 years, but it was very nice. I'd forgotten all about that until the other day when one of my former students and reminded me of our championship and asked me, do you remember our championship? And I said, yes, thank you, I do remember that.
Now, your name is Gerald Bernstein, but people around here call you Bummy. Where did that nickname come from?
Ah, yes, how I got the name Bummy, yes. Well, how I got that name? It was in 1947, and I had just entered Gallaudet University. And that fall, there was the World Series between the Brooklyn Dodgers and the New York Yankees. And what was really amazing is that the Dodgers were even in the World Series because they had never played well. For example, their outfielders, they would hit the ball and they would run for it and the ball would end up hitting them on the head. Or they had a shortstop who would rush up on the ball and the ball would go right through his legs. So that was the famous 47 Dodgers who won the World Series. And I was at Gallaudet at the time, and we didn't have TV. All we had was the radio. And so we would have to find a hard of hearing person, a student at Gallaudet who could hear some, and they would listen to the radio in their room, and all of us, all the other students, would go to that room, and they would give us the information, the play-by-play of what was happening. Who had stolen a base, who was out, who had gotten a hit. It was very exciting. And I was really getting excited, and I would hit the other students. And I was becoming kind of a pest. Now I should back up. The Dodgers were known as Das Bums because of the way that they played the game. They're losing so much. And so it was kind of the way that they played. They were called Das Bums. And so I was hitting all my classmates and kind of being so disruptive that they took me by the scruff of my neck, pulled me into the restroom, put on the tap water and said, "We're going to baptize you the bum." And they sprinkled me with water. Now, I'm Jewish, so I didn't know anything about baptism, but they thought that this was a ritual that they wanted to let me experience, and they baptized me the bum. And another student said, "Well, bum isn't nice. I'm going to add MY to that, and I'm just going to call you Bummy." And that name has stuck to this day. Many people don't even know what my first name really is or how to spell my first name or last name. They just always reference me as Bummy because everybody knows who Bummy is. That's me.
I understand you were the first deaf person to be certified as a parliamentarian. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. I am not the first deaf person. The first deaf person was, I can't remember his name, but the time was 1950s that that individual became a certified professional parliamentarian, and that he has since passed away. But as of today, I believe that I'm the only certified professional parliamentarian in the United States or in the world. That's considered a CPP. And I've traveled around helping individuals and organizations. I've been doing this for about 15 or 20 years, and I've given over 220 workshops and still adding more. I know that there are several good people out there that haven't yet passed the written or the oral exams to get your certification, and I keep encouraging them. I can't live forever. I would certainly like to, but there's just no way that's going to happen. So now remember, I wasn't the first parliamentarian, but I am the only one in the U.S.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to give you this opportunity to share any thoughts with our audience, any final comments or things that may have come to mind that you'd like to share with us.
I would like to say a little bit about how I've enjoyed coming back from time to time to the state of Minnesota. The last time I was here was in 1985, and at that time it was the celebration of the 100th anniversary of the Gallaudet Alumni Association for the Minnesota chapter. And I hope to come back again in the near future or even in the far present. And I would like to close by keeping it short and simple. I don't see the people here in Minnesota as just people. I honestly see them as giants. Minnesota as a state is one of the states that's received the most honors of all. And it's due to the great people and the great deaf people and hard of hearing people that are here in the state. They're a wonderful group, and I applaud their accomplishments. And I owe much to these individuals, much of my success, my achievements, and my many, many awards, and my many honors really are from Minnesota and my experience at Faribault. Just recently, in 1988, Gallaudet decided to honor me with a doctorate degree. They called me Dr. something. Of course, nobody ever calls me that. But in the audience was one of my former students from Minnesota who had moved to the Washington, D.C. area. That student watched me receiving my award and came up to me afterwards and said, "Now, do you realize that your achievements go back to Faribault, Minnesota?" And I had to agree. I had to say, yes, I owe a great deal of thanks to Faribault and the state of Minnesota. I really am appreciative to you all.
Wow, I've really enjoyed this interview with you. Hearing your stories about your experiences here in Minnesota. Thank you so much for coming to share these wonderful stories with me and others. There is so much rich history you have experienced for us to learn about. Again, thank you, Bummy, for being with us. So this sign here, what does that mean? Can you give me an explanation of it?
Yes, I forgot to explain about the use of the word parliamentarian. And we sign it like this, a P on the arm. And you might ask why they sign that way. I honestly don't know why. It's a long word. It's Parliamentary. It comes from France. Parli, Parli, which means to speak, and mentari, which means to act. And they put those together, parliamentary. And now I am, as the individual, am a parliamentarian. Now, what a parliamentarian does is help to follow the rules of a meeting. Many people don't know the right way to conduct a meeting, and that results in a lot of arguments. And we typically use a book called Robert's Rules of Order. We condense that to RROR. And that book defines how meetings should be conducted. What is the proper order? What's the proper way to make a motion? How do you second a motion? How do you allow debate?